Good morning. Hemshech Ayin Beis, volume 3. We are on page 1440. Aleph Tov Mem. The theme being Yichud Kudsha Brich v'Shechina, the unification, the union of the two divine dimensions, Kudsha Brich, which literally means God, but the Holy One, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Shechina, as God manifests Shechina from the word Shechina Mislabeshes, he resides and dwells. That's the word Shechina. And it's a very fundamental word. We know it's found so many places throughout Torah. Obviously, the first place is V'shachanti b'seicham regarding the Mishkan. But you find the concept of Nenim Ziv Shechina benefiting from the glory or the reflection of the Shechina, the revelation of the Shechina appears. So the word Shechina is been analyzed here in detail, and all based on, I mentioned this already, but I'll mention it again because it's so fundamental. And a mimer from the Alter Rebbe said, the night of Simchas Torah, Tov Kuf Samach Daled, which was the year 1804. Actually, it was Tov Kuf Samach Daled, would have been 1803. And it's printed, if you look it up, I'm sorry, it's Tov Kuf Samach Hey, my mistake. Simchas Torah Tov Kuf Samach Hey, 1804. And it's printed in Maimori Admur HaZaken, Tov Kuf Samach Daled. There's a Hanocha from the Mittler Rebbe. The Mittler Rebbe wrote it. It's on page 235 and 236 there. And there's also another Hanocha written by the Mariel, the Alter Rebbe's brother, which is printed by the Tzemach Tzedek, it's printed in Eira Teira of the Tzemach Tzedek in Shmini Atzeres, page 1825. Also printed elsewhere in Chanukah, but it's not relevant in all the sources right now. And it's interesting, as I mentioned a number of times, that the Rebbe in the first Maimer Basel Legani that he delivered, Tavshin Yud Aleph, 1951, right in the beginning, brings this biur. It's the biur on the pasuk Havaya Liba Ezri, and there he brings it from the Mittler Rebbe, as the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, as the Tzemach Tzedek writes, the Mittler Rebbe wrote it. But there also brings us to another place where this is cited in Hemshel V'Kocha, Tofresh Lamed Zayin, the Rebbe Marash, the father of the Rebbe Rashab, has a classic, one of the great Hemshechim series of Maimarim is V'Kocha Tofresh Lamed Zayin. Tofresh Lamed Zayin is the year 1877 that he delivered a Hemshech. Chapter 27 is actually a development of these themes here as well. So if you really want to understand the whole picture, looking in these sources would definitely be helpful. I've been incorporating it in my explanations, and I found a few other places that I could refer to, but I don't want to go through all the sources right now. The reason I'm mentioning V'Kocha, because in the Hemshech V'Kocha, the Rebbe in the Maimer Basel Legani, he quotes the V'Kocha that quotes the Mittler Rebbe in this Biur Hashem Ezi, where he says, among other things, that's where the Maimer says that you have Yichud Kudsha Brich v'Shechina ad reim hamaylos, through all the highest levels. And that's what we've been doing here, understanding Kudsha Brich and Shechina, first in Zohar and Malchus and Atzilus, with Malchus being Shechina. Then he moved from there and explained how it's Chochma and Bina, Abba v'Ima of Atzilus. Then Keser and Chochma. Then within Keser and Arich, the Malchus of Arich, Ampin, and the higher levels of Midas, or the Etzema Midas of Arich. Then Atik and Arich in Keser is the difference in Kudsha Brich and Shechina. And now the last thing is we're moving even further. And the next was Ak in Adam Kadmon, also two explanations, two levels, Malchus of Ak and Etzem of Ak, and then Arich, or general Ak, and Pnimius Ak, where the Kav resides. And then, which is where we're up to now, middle of now, is what about the Kav itself? That the Kav which is the divine energy that is the first stream of consciousness that enters into existence, into the cosmos after the Tzimtzum, like he said, I'm reading the paragraph, the first line of the paragraph on page 1439. And as he's going to explain, it's actually the primary level of Shechina, because that's the essential meaning of Shechina. Shem Shechina al Shem Shechina mislabes b'shalamata mimenu. That Shechina is referring to a divine that resides in something that's lower than it, is something that's removed from it. Because like he explains, if it's the same level or it's close to the same level, like Kislapshas Partzufim, it's not called Shechina because they're commensurate to each other. To say Chach, for example, even though he did say Chachma and Bina earlier, but in the true sense of it, things that are in the same world, the same domain, Shechina would not really be the most applicable word. You use it because, relatively speaking, a lower level like Bina is like Shechina compared to Chachma. But the real place it's used is when it's a true leap, like he explained, like Meichen and Midas. That's why Bina is called Shechina, as he said. However, but he says, but the primary name of Shechina is Malchus, because Malchus, Shechena's bebiyah, because the leap from Malchus to Biyah is a true paradigm shift. That's why it has to go through the parsa, the partition, pierces the partition, and that is where the real Shechina, that's Malchus is Shechina, because it's Shechena's mislabeshes in Biyah. And the second aspect he brought to explain that was because Gam Sha'ir be'etzem u'lahoyra lishka b'tachtein. So one is the leap, and the second because the purpose of the oir, be'etzem. What's the purpose of the oir? Is not to remain removed. It's to be shechen lishka b'tachtein, to radiate and reside in tachtein. B'shechanti b'seichel. So that's why the primary word Shechina is going to be when there is the leap, and especially a leap that goes into Tachtenim. So if this is the case with Malchus of Atzilus, U'kamoi Kain says that I'm summing up what we've learned. U'kamoi Kain, Hamshacha b'Atzilus me'erein Seit Baruch Hu also works that way. Just as from Atzilus to Biyah in the microcosm, there's that leap, Malchus of Atzilus being the Shechina from Atzilus into Biyah, into Bria, so too, how about to get to Atzilus from Erein Sof, that's completely beyond Atzilus. And here we're talking already higher level. We're not just talking Keser and Ak. So Nikra, so he says, Hamshach Matzil's made in Sabaruch Nikra Shechina. Because just like a person, Adam Elyon, a person who's Adam Elyon, he's already compared to the divine, but he's not the divine. Like Adam Eloi Kamoy Elyon. And therefore, in order to go from a leap, in order to go from the divine, the core divine, into Adam. And he's going to explain, this is also with Atzilus shortly. He's going to explain, you're going from Bilti Bal Gvul, Bilti Bal Tachlis, something that's completely beyond structure, beyond definitions and parameters. B'neshamas Yisrael, sheneslapsha begufim, to manifest in their finite bodies. It's not possible without the leap of the Tzimtzum. Like the Tzimtzum Shechinte, like the Shechina, that diminishes itself, that concentrates itself, in the Mishkan, between the two rods of the ark. So that tells you this. So just like Malchus is a leap into Malchus of Atzilus is a leap into Bria, so too for there to be a connection between the Adam and the divine, you need to have a tzimtzum, a leap. That's why that's why it's called Shechina, because Shechina indicates on that leap that something is on one level. In order to come to a much lower level, it needs to reside there. It needs to go through a tzimtzum. So the same thing is with Atzilus, because Atzilus is also called Adam. Atzilus is called Adam Elyon. Al Shem Le'elyon. Shenikra Adam Al Shem Adam Le'elyon. But it's still only Adam Levad. So how do you have a higher level of divine energy manifesting in Atzilus through our Aveda, more than what Atzilus has on its own? Today, Lias Atzilus, Bechinas Atzilus Elyon. EF Shekim Shei Yitzimtzum Betchila. So in order for Atzilus to be, it has to be through the Tzimtzum. Shetzamtzum b'silik eri HaGadol al atzad. There has to be the Tzimtzum that the divine was concealed. And the only thing that remains is the Kav, and the only thing that radiates after the Tzimtzum is the Kav, which is a limited flow. It's only there to illuminate that which the Tzimtzum concealed, but not to reveal higher levels of the divine at this point. At this point, it's just there to be able to create existence. And through the Kav, Hed Ein Sof. So he says this Eid is not legalis atzmuse, because then you're back to square one. Then you're back to without the lead. The whole Tzimtzum was in order to conceal the etzem. Later through Avodah, as we discussed, we widen the channels. So the Kav, we can then reach even higher levels. But initially, it's the sleep. Okay. So he says it like this, Imkein Ikar Shmoya B'china Shechina. And that's why its primary name is Shechina, the Kav. Because it too, like Malchus of Atzilus, is going through a diminished state in order to go into, to make that paradigm shift into Bria. So too the Kav is called Shechina. Al Shem Shechina Mislavish B'mokem HaMetzumtzum L'Hoyerese. Like the teacher who has to spoon feed the student. The Kav is not all the full blown energy as it was before the Tzimtzum. It's only a Kav. It's very intense. It's a thin ray of light in order to manifest to manifest the Mokem HaMetzumtzum to radiate there. And this Kav descends and evolves to the point that its light shines, like we said, Semsem Shchinte, between the two rods of the ark, and and within each one of us. So we see from this that the Kav is the primary place where you would call Shechina, because that really demonstrates the real essence of what Shechina is, that a higher level of divine is diminishing itself to be able to reside and manifest in a particular place in the Mishkan.
So the Kudsha Brich is
Mishkan, or each one of us. And therefore, Kav is the primary place that we call it Shechina. 1 second, I'll soon stop for questions. Just give me a few minutes. Now, this piece that I just summed up, what we learned on Friday, last class, much of it is actually word for word from V'kocha, from the Rebbe Marash's Maimer that I mentioned before, Tofresh Lamed Zayin. So the Rebbe Rashab is actually quoting his father. The Rebbe Marash, as I said, V'kocha chapter 27. To actually compare it. So a lot of it is from there, a lot of the language. And this is going to be very relevant as we learn the next section, because there in the Rebbe Marash, he brings two reasons why the Kav is called Shechina. Now, when you go to Basel Legani, Tov Shin Yud Aleph, he actually revisits that, and he quotes all these Maimorim that I said. He quotes the Mittler Rebbe that says the Kav is the Shechina, that Shechina goes on the Kav, not just on lower levels like Zoh, like Malchus, but the Kav. The Mittler Rebbe, as I said, is the Bir on Avayli Be'ezri Tovkuf Samach Hey. The Mittler Rebbe is in turn cited by the Tzemach Tzedek and in V'kocha. And here, after explaining the Kudsha Brich Shechina on all the levels of Ishtalshus, he's finally going back to this quote that's also the Kav is the Shechina. So the Mittler Rebbe makes this, the Alter Rebbe's Maimer is the Mittler Rebbe's Hanoche, but he calls it Ksav Yad Much. That's what the Tzemach Tzedek says. The Ksav Yad of my teacher, my master, my father-in-law. The Rebbe Marash calls it in the Ksav, in the manuscript of my grandfather, because the Mittler Rebbe is the Rebbe Marash's grandfather. The Rebbe Rashab quotes the V'kocha on much of what we just learned. Not all of it. He adds explanation, which we've discussed, we've reviewed. But as we're going to soon see, and we go a little deeper into this, how V'kocha explains different reasons why the Kav is called Shechina. And the Rebbe brings this as well in Basel Legani. I did notice one thing about Legani, which may be relevant to our previous conversation we had here last class. The Rebbe then continues, which is not brought in these Maimorim, that when he says in Bosel Legani, Iker Shechina b'tachteinim, that Iker Shechina is even deeper than Shechina. Iker Shechina b'tachteinim, because Iker Shechina goes even higher than the Kav. That's Dafke b'tachteinim. We need to understand what it means, because the Mishkan, was it not Iker Shechina in the Mishkan? And it's apparent that the Iker Shechina, the Mishkan, brought back the Shechina as it was in the beginning of creation. So it's something that needs to be reviewed more in deep depth. I'm going to hold off on that until we learn more of this. I can understand the picture, and then we can go back to that. But I just did want to mention, if you end up looking there, you may have that confusion. But he speaks there. But right now we're up to the point of Shechina being, we've moved all the way to the Kav being the first manifestation of the Shechina, because it radiates. The Kav is the energy. The first time the divine energy after the Tzimtzum is channeled into existence. That's what Shechina means. That's the real essence of Shechina. On a microcosmic level, that's like Malchus of Atzilus radiating through the Parsa. As I mentioned, the Parsa and the Tzimtzum are often equated. Obviously, microcosm, macrocosm, with Atzilus, the Klolos, in macrocosm being Eir Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, and the Kav being the Eir Ein Sof, the Eir as it comes into the Kav, which he's calling now Shechina. He didn't yet mention what is the level of Kudsha Brichu. Kudsha Brichu is clearly going to be the level of Eir Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, and Shechina is going to be the Kav. So after all the different levels, we've now reached to the level of Kav, but I wanted to show and emphasize how all the Rabbeim, the Tzemach Tzedek, the Rebbe Marash, and the Rebbe Rashab, all are very, very keen on emphasizing that this is like a Chiddush. It's an Iksavyat of the Mittler Rebbe, but it's a Chiddush of the Alter Rebbe, that the Kav is called Shechina. They make it clear that it's a Chiddush. But we have to understand what it means. We've already learned the main reason because the Kav comes down below, but we're going to soon learn that there are three reasons why the Kav is called Shechina, and the Rebbe Rashab is adding a third reason, where in the V'kacha he only brings two reasons. And we're going to learn this inside shortly. But that's a summation of what we've learned. I will stop if anyone wants to ask anything, and then we'll continue on inside here. Any questions?
You answered my question. I wanted to know if Kav is Shechina, what is Kudsha Brichu? So you just said that Kudsha Brichu is the Lifnei Tzimtzum.
And I said he's going to say, the Rebbe Rashab is going to say what it is. But we're not there yet. We'll soon get there. Okay. So with that, you guys are ready to continue, or anybody wants to ask anything else?
You said in your summary, it was several minutes ago, but so I'm going to have to paraphrase and not get it quite right. But you said that the or, I'm trying to remember. You said basically the or is mishtal shalel. It comes down level by level until we expand our containers and can reach higher. But wouldn't it? Did you mean this, or are you implying, or actually, or also saying that essentially we bring down to hamshacha? It's not a rut, so we're not reaching higher. Well, maybe we are, but we're ultimately bringing down light from higher levels. Is it or it's the same thing? Yes.
Well, he's not talking about avodah right now. He's talking about the way God, the God, basically, there's Kudsha Bricha and there's Shechina. There's two levels. We're going to get back to Yichud of Kudsha Bricha with Shechina. Right now, the point is that the way God created existence, he created like Sevav Kalam and Mamala Kalam. There's the transcendent energy, the Kudsha Bricha that's removed. Shechina is as it manifests, Zah and Malchus. So what is that on higher levels? Long before we existed, God made a Tzimtzum, and through that Tzimtzum, he then drew a Kav. That Kav is called Shechina.
I understand that.
Irrelevant.
I'm not asking about.
It's irrelevant to our Avodah right now. This is the way the creation happens.
I understand that. I'm not talking about the Kav. I'm talking about the language you yourself used. So I'm not going off on a tangent. I'm asking about something you said. And you said until basically we expand the containers and we go up higher. But it's really
if it's confusing you, then let me just say this. He doesn't say this in the Mimer here. I just said it for those that would get it, but if it's confusing, I'd hold up on that. And we'll get to there when we talk about the Avodah part. Expanding is already Avodah. Right now, we're not talking the Avodah, we're just talking the actual level of Kav, drawing down energy commensurate to the student. He's not talking right now the Avodah, what we do with that. So
I understand.
We'll get to the Avodah part.
I only asked what you meant, but I'll wait. I only asked what it's about something you said, but I'll wait.
I'm saying, if you're asking, so since I said it doesn't say in the mimer yet, let's learn it inside and we'll get to it. So bottom line right now is
the Kav different oil than Lifnei Tzimtzum?
Excuse me?
The Kav is a oil mugbal different from Lifnei Tzimtzum?
Why don't you answer that question after you tell me?
The way that we're explaining now, it is. But always I hear.
Or did you ever hear otherwise? I mean, there's Ein Sof, the language. You're familiar with the language in Eitz Chaim? Ein Sof hayimamala kol hametzias v'lo hayim nesinas mokim le'elamas klal. V'achar kach tzimtzum es eirei v'siluk eirei al hatzad v'nishar chol u'mokim ponei. V'achar kach himshiv kav kotzer v'dak kav v'chut kotzer v'dak u'misham misagel v'sava elamas ak and so on. This is the classic language from Eitz Chaim. If you're not familiar with it, I'll happy to explain it, but I thought it's something that everybody knows. But if not, that's the process. So the example for it would be the teacher is a brilliant teacher with infinite knowledge. The student would not be able to contain that knowledge and that brilliance. So the teacher goes silent, has to be a tzimtzum, conceals all his intelligence, and then comes a stream of consciousness like a paintbrush, a kav, which means a line, chut, a thread, that from connected on top to the Ein Sof before the tzimtzum, the Iggul HaGadol, and draws down energy in a stream of consciousness like a laser beam, and is able to now create a structured milo mata, because a kav by definition means there's higher and lower, a hierarchy, and that kav in turn will create and shape and define all of existence. This is, if any of you need a refresher on that, I just gave it. Is that what you're asking about? Shlomo, is that what you?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
There is need more explanation, but thank you.
Yeah, so the kav is called Shechina. I was going to continue to elaborate on this now. This is all the language from V'kocha, mind you. So we'll start from the line, Ad shemer arose ben shnei badei ha'aron, u'b'tech kol echad ve'echad. Shkanti b'seh. The line is 3, 6, 9 lines from the top of page 1440, and the pages can be found at ayinbeis.com if you want to follow the text. So the last word on the line, we're going to continue. As I said, it's all chapter 27 in V'kocha. Hemsheh V'kocha Tov Reish Lamed Zayin. V'nimtze. It's all the language there. So v'nimtze, what do we derive from this? Ki ikar shem hakav, that the primary name of the kav, hayetzorech lihikodes b'shem Shechina, should have actually been called with the name Shechina. He's not asking a question as much. It's not really a question, but it's in the form of a clarification. Based on this, the main name of the kav is really the name Shechina. That's what the kav. Kav is not just a line of energy; it's a manifestation of energy. Like we say, v'shechanti b'seichem. That's the kav. The loy nikra b'shem kav, and the only reason it's called b'shem kav, it's only called the loy nikra b'shem kav rak. It's not called b'shem. It means not that it's not called b'shem kav. He means the loy nikra b'shem kav rak kedei sheyuvan inyan. The only reason it's called the name kav is in order to explain the idea of tzimtzumei ba'atzmei. So kav indicates the fact that a kav means a line, means an energy that was not defined in any way, was expansive in every possible way, has now turned into a laser beam, like a line. What is that coming to explain? Tzimtzumei ba'atzmei. how the Eibishter concealed the energy within himself through al derech moshel kav achut. That's like an example of a kav, a line, and achut, a thread. Shehem hamshachim mitzumtzemes levad. That it's only a very limited hamshachah compared to Ein Sof, which is the infinite divine without any limits. The word kav indicates, kav achut indicates the tzimtzum involved. So in other words, really it should have been called the name Shechina. The really reason it's called kav because kav tells us about the tzimtzum part of it. Shechina itself would just tell you that it resides there. And we'd have to extrapolate and understand the way it comes down. How can the divine reside in a limited place between the two rods of the ark, or within each one of our hearts and souls? So it's through a tzimtzum. The kav is explaining the tzimtzum part of it. That's what he's saying here. It's an interesting expression. This is the Reb Marash's language. Just for the record, the two words that Reb Rashab adds is ba'atzmai and levad. If you want to know exactly, I compared it. He has tzimtzumei ba'atzmei. Ba'atzmei is an addition of the Reb Rashab, and here at the end, mitzumtzemes levad. The word levad is added by the Reb Rashab, which adds emphasis to the point. Aval be'emes, but in truth, says the Rebbe Rashab, quoting the Reb Marash, but in truth, in truth, its name really is Shechina. This is in order, the only thing that this kav is coming to tell us, in order to notify us, inform us on the form of the hamshacha, how the hamshacha is happening. But the etzem hamshacha, omnam, etzem hamshacha, yikor Shechina. The very hamshacha itself is called Shechina. So here's interesting. The Rebbe Marash's, the Mittler Rebbe's language in the Hanoch of the beer of Havai Liba Ezri, Tovkov Samachei, is he calls the language actually there is exactly that the kav is called Shechina. So you see here how they're medayik. That means the Mittler Rebbe, the way he heard the Alter Rebbe say it, or the way he wrote it at least, is that the kav is called Shechina. So which one is it? So the Rebbe Marash and the Rebbe Marashab are explaining there's two aspects here. The kav is not the name of the hamshach itself. The kav is the eifin hamshach. It's telling you how. Like when you say, imagine you're saying there's Ein Sof, fills all of existence. Then there's a tzimtzum that conceals that divine. Then came a line and a thread. What does that mean, a line and a thread? So he's saying that's the eifin hamshach. It's coming to tell us the manner, the way it came is like a line and a thread. But what is it? The etzem hamshach is Shechina. The Shechina is manifesting. That's what the kav is. So it's a diuk, and really in the Alter Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe's lashon here. Very interesting. Etzem hamshach yikor Shechina al shem sheshechina mislabish. Why is it called Shechina? Because Shechina means that it's shechin, it resides, it dwells. Umislabish, and manifests like a levut, like in a garment, to radiate within the darkness and the concealment of the tzimtzum. So the tzimtzum created a black hole, an empty space. Not talking about the Rishimu now, because it's still called a mokim chol mokim pone. So it's an empty space, like the student is not hearing anything from the teacher. It's total silence. And the kav is the method, the way that energy is drawn. But what's happening, the etzem hamshach is called Shechina. There's an energy now that has flowed into this dark space, into this silence. You now have a flow, a flow that's coming like a thread and like a line and a thread. But the etzem hamshach is called Shechina. Because that's what the kav is doing. Like teaching the Aleph Beis, or spoon feeding and streaming the divine consciousness into existence. V'chein, and then the kav continues. This Shechina, which is that samshacha through this kav, v'chein, and so yered v'nimsha, and so it descends and is drawn and extends. Ba'atzilus ha'elyon, in the higher Atzilus sometimes called Elyon, ha'elyon. Until a reflection of this kav And the Shechina is nimshach, is drawn into Klolos Neshamas Yisrael, the general souls of Israel. Like he said before, B'seich kol echad ve'echad v'shachanti b'seicham. Not b'seichei, b'seicham, b'seich kol echad ve'echad, the Neshamas Yisrael. And he continues, Shagam sha'neshamas meruchakim min hakav. Even though the souls are distant from the kav, because the kav is such an intense energy, so the souls are distant. Im kol zeh meir behem ha'aras hakav. Nevertheless, within them radiates a reflection of the kav. So the kav is like a very powerful energy. It's diminished intensely, diminished, extremely diminished because it's a kav, but it still needs to go through plenty of gradations and concealments, and ultimately, a reflection of it will manifest in the souls ha'aras hakav. That's said again, the language from V'kocha, and the Rebbe Rashab is quoting it. Okay. Any questions?
Rabbi, I'm a little confused, and maybe because I wasn't at the whole of the last class, but what is actually the tzimtzum made up of? You say it's the darkness, like what is it? Like you're telling me about the kav, how that's the energy is coming through.
When a teacher needs to teach something to a student that's completely infinitely distant from him, what does the teacher do? He can't allow his consciousness to just flow and speak. He'll overwhelm the student. So he falls silent. The tzimtzum means concealing your thoughts, in simple terms, if you wish.
Mm-hmm.
And
but it's coming from the Orion.
You never heard. One second, you never heard that?
No,
before?
I know what the tzimtzum is. I'm just trying to understand what it's composed of. Like what is
composed of silence, of quieting yourself, of restraint, of withholding, of concealing. All those words are applicable.
It's the concealment of the Orion self. Is that what it is?
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
If our souls are rooted, if the Neshamas Yisrael souls are rooted much, much higher, why do we need the kav to illuminate light within us? We are sourced higher. I mean, let's just saying that's the channel, that's the pathway. In other words, do we need the kav to ascend?
We don't only need the kav. We also need malachim, and we need Torah, and we need Einei Ha'eda, the leaders of the community, of the people. Mm-hmm. Don't you remember that we spoke about the neshamas are rooted, but then they come down into a dark world, and they come down level by level by level. Every morning we say, Neshama shenasata bi tahorihi, ata barasa, ata yitzarta, ata nefachta bi. This is all the kav, is the force of divine energy that everything travels through. So
I see.
So the root is a root, but then there's the way it actually manifests as it manifests downward.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So now he says, "V'oid yesh lemer." This is also from V'kocha, a second explanation why the kav is called Shechina. Shenikra kav b'shem Shechina. Another reason we can say that the kav is called Shechina, al shem shu hamakabel me'er ein sof u'mashpia ben natzolim. It's called Shechina due to the fact that it receives from the infinite divine light, and it's mashpia, and it transmits to the emanations.
This is the same thing, no? The hoyer mitoch cheshvas hagolus. It's the same thing.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I think let's read on and you'll see how it's different. Because right now, the first thing he was talking about, the kav, only as radiating like Shechina. It's radiating in a limited place. That's what it means. It manifests in a limited place. He doesn't say that it's about the Kabul Me'erein Sof. He's not talking about the kav as it's receiving from Erein Sof. He's talking about the kav as it's manifesting in the Cheshches HaTzimtzum, in the darkness. Now he's saying that the kav is another reason it's called Shechina, because it's interfacing between Erein Sof and Mashpia ben Netzolim. But I think let's read on, and you'll see it become clear as he's going to explain it. He's going to explain the different reasons. But I would wait till we finish the paragraph. It'll be easier to understand. Okay? Remember, the Oidya Shlema is from the Kocha. If you look in Basiligani, the Rebbe, I think, explains the two interpretations as such. The Kav comes and shines into existence, and then he says another Yesh Lemer is that it shines into Neshamas Yisrael. I have to look. Let me just see a second. I want to see the Basiligani, how he... One second.
That was basically my question.
I don't know what didn't sound like to me that question at all.
Well, the kav shining into the worlds versus shining into Neshamas Yisrael. That's what you just said. I can understand the kav bringing Elokus into the worlds, but the notion that it somehow comes into us.
I already answered that question, because Neshamas Yisrael continued to travel down, and the kav is the way they travel. My answer stands. What I said before. This doesn't change what we're speaking about now. Neshamas Yisrael is not the worlds. Both the worlds and the Neshamas Yisrael need the kav.
Okay, that's both.
That's a given.
I understand. Right. So what's the question you're asking now?
He's asking what's the difference between the second interpretation, or Oidya Shlema, and what it said before.
Mm.
Okay, let's learn inside. I don't know, the Basiligani doesn't change anything here. Okay. So the Oidya Shlemer, that the kav is called because it's mekabel of Erein Sof and mashpia ben Netzolim, and it's mashpia to the Netzolim, the emanations. So on a sensible level, this is different than what we said before, because before he was just speaking about the kav as a manifest in the Cheshches HaTzimtzum. He's not talking about how it's receiving or transmitting. He just speaks about the level itself, that the kav is this level, the level of Shechina, Shemislabeshes, and all the way down to the B'shnei Badei Oren and B'seich Kol Echad Ve'echad. Now he's saying B'kav Me'erein Sof, but let's see how he explains it, and then we'll understand better the Oidya Shlemer. Now the next section is actually the Rebbe Rashab's explanation. U'kamoshn is Bar Liel is the Rebbe Rashab adding now Pshat to explain the V'kocha. Just for the record. Let me just see one thing, please. U'kamoshn is Bar Liel. In the previous page, we learned the following. We learned B'bchinas Malchus the Ak. When he was speaking on the lower level, he was speaking that Malchus of Ak is the Shechina, Shemekabel Me'erein Sof, U'mashpia ben Netzolim. Literally the same language. If you look on the previous page, 1439, that's what I wanted to look up. So he says, on the line that begins, Mebchinas Ein Sof, he says, V'nikla melech mipnei shemekabelas mebchinas Ein Sof, Ak, Malchus Vak, Hainu B'chinas Ak, Shenikra Ein Sof, Umashpez ben Netzolim. So we said a similar language earlier on Ak, obviously on a far lower level, So he's comparing the two. So he says, like we said earlier, that's Makabel Ma'ed Ein Sof. There he said Eid Ein Sof was Ak. Umashpir ben Netzolim. Netzolim is Atzilus. In the Netzolim, the emanations of Atzilus. So he says, Kain Hu, Bechlol is Gili HaKav. So too is it with Bechlol is Gili HaKav, that the Kav is not just a manifestation of energy, it's also a Makabel. Shubchinis Makabel. It's a Makabel of the Eid Ein Sof that's before the Tzimtzum. Umeshum Zen Nikra Shechina. So in other words, Shechina is not just on what the Kav is affecting. The Hamshacha, like he said, the Eifen Hamshacha and the Etzem Hamshacha, it's not just talking about the actual transmission, it's also talking about the Kav as being a recipient of that what comes from above it. So Shechina here means more than just residing and dwelling, but also receiving from and then drawing it down into the Netzolim. That's what he's saying here. Okay. So that's a second reason. That's what the Rebbe Marash says, and that's what the Rebbe Rashab explained now.
What is he adding with his explanation?
I just told you the word Mekabel Me'ed Ein Sof. In the first explanation, you don't say Mekabel Me'ed Ein Sof. He's just talking about that Shkin v'Shakanti b'Seicham. He's not talking about where it comes from. He's just talking that it resides here. The divine has gone through a tzimtzum, a kav, a chut, and it's residing in the cheshches at tzimtzum, and from there it evolves into between the two rods of the ark and the neshamas Yisrael. He's adding here that it's mekabel from Eid Ein Sof.
Not adding. The Rebbe Maharash said it. What is the
adding mekabel me'ed Ein Sof. That's what he's adding. If you don't understand, let's read further and let's see how he explains.
Maharash is saying it. The Rebbe Maharash.
So I just said that. So he added. Yeah, what? The Rebbe Maharash said it, and the Rebbe Rashab is quoting it and explaining it.
That's my question. What is the Rebbe Rashab adding in his explanation?
He compared it to what he said before about Ak. That Ak has a similar idea, that it's not just Shechina, that Ak also is Mekabel Me'ed Ein Sof. Malchus of Ak, I should say, is Mekabel from a higher level and manifest. He's comparing it to that. I don't know if it's an explanation or a comparison, but that's what he's added.
What is the
anyway, let's continue reading. Let's see till the end of the paragraph, like I said, the whole picture, and then we'll try to explain everything step by step. Okay. Now he says V'gam. It appears to me that the V'gam is a third reason, because you'll soon see that he's going to talk about three reasons. So he says V'gam, additionally, Kamoishin is ill, as was explained earlier, the Reishis HaKav nasa Atik la'ak. There's another thing that happens with the Kav. So far the Kav is, number one, it radiates the darkness, the student. And from there it evolves level by level. Number two, it receives from Eid Ein Sof and is mashpia to the emanations. And number three now, Ak, we learned earlier, Reishis HaKav, we learned earlier when we spoke about Ak, nasa Atik la'ak. Remember we said in Eitz Chaim, he says that there's a Ke'ein Atik, a Bereish Galgalta de Ak, like on the skull of Ak, there's something similar to Atik. What is that Atik? That comes from Reishis HaKav, the top of the Kav, the head of the Kav. The Kav, the moment it leaves the Eid Ein Sof, before the Tzimtzum, that moment that it touches, that becomes Atik of Ak. So it's a third dimension that we have now in Atik. So like we learned earlier, that just like Malchus of Atzilus becomes Atik of Bria, and that's why it's called Shechina al Shem Shaha'arosa, because its reflection Nimshech Liya Shechen Bebria, it goes in order to Shechen, to reside in Bria. So I'm going to skip the parentheses for a moment. 3-line parentheses, I'll get back to in a moment. He says, Kain al derech zeh, so too, similar to that, b'chinas hakav u'komay b'chinas atik l'gaba ak. So too, atik, the kav, rather, is like atik to ak. So like Malchus of Atzilus is the atik to Bria, the Kav is Atik to Ak. And we're going to learn that Ak, of course, is called Bria de Klolos. Elma Bria de Klolos. Or like he says, Hu Kumay B'chinas Atik L'Gabe Ak, Shenikra Adam de Bria. Says it right here, actually. I thought he was going to say it later. That Ak is taka called Adam de Bria in the macrocosm. So it comes a third dimension. So Atik, so the Kav, one is Shechina, it radiates the Tzimtzum. Two, it receives from Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum and transmits that into the emanations of Atzilus. And three, it becomes the Atik of Adam Kadmon, like Malchus is Atik of Bria, the Proteus in microcosm. The Nimshach, let me just see the parentheses. Let me read another 2 lines. I'll go back to the parentheses in a moment. The Nimshach ha'arase, and this reflection, this light of the Kav, the reflection of it continues to extend. V'nimshach, it extends liyashechin b'biyah, to reside in biyah, bri yitzir asiyah haklolim. Now we're talking the macrocosm, because Malchus of Atzilus goes into the microcosmic biyah, and the Kav becomes Atik of Bria, goes into the macrocosmic biyah, biyah haklolim, shehem gimel b'chinas Adam, the 3 levels of Adam. Adam the Bria, Ak, Adam the Yitzira Akudim, Adam the Yitzira Akudim, and Adam the Asiya Atzilus. As I've explained in other places, in other times, there's the famous mimer Drush Gimel Mine Adam from the Alter Rebbe. It's printed in Eira Teira Bolok and Eira Teira Inyanim with its Samach Tzedek's gloss and notes. That in the macrocosm you have also Adam the Bria is Ak, Adam the Yitzir is Akudim. Sometimes it says Akudim and Akudim. Sometimes it actually says Atik and Arich. Here he brings Akudim. And Adam the Asiya in macrocosm is Atzilus. Is Atzilus in microcosm. Sometimes it says Atzilus and Biyah. So bottom line is that the Kav, which becomes Atik of Bria de Chlolos, of the macrocosmic Bria, which is Ak, then continues to extend and reside in the Biyah Klolim, in the general Stauslus of Bria Tzirasir, which is Ak, Akudim, and Atzilus. That's what he said here. So that's a third interpretation. And now he's going to explain the difference between them, between these different interpretations. But that's how he lays it out. Now, this last piece is an addition from the Rebbe Rashab. It's not in V'kocha, this V'gam. But I want to read the parentheses first, and then I'll stop for questions before we continue. So he says like this. I'm going back a few lines to the parentheses. After he said that the Shechina, that's why it's called Shechina, because Sheichin Bebria, like Malchus of Atzilus resides or dwells in Bria, Ubamokem Achem Avur, parentheses, he says, elsewhere it's explained, the Gam B'china Zu Shenasa Atik Libria, that also this hashpah, this level, where Malchus of Atzilus, microcosm, becomes the Atik, like the Kesser, the Atik of the next world, Bria, Hu B'chinas hashpah B'kiruv, the B'chinas Malchus. It's hashpah B'kiruv, meaning it's hashpah not from a distance, but a close-up type of transmission. Hu B'chinas Gili HaTainug L'Neshamas B'Gan Eden Elyon, referring to the Gili HaTainug, the revelation of pleasure that the neshamas have in Gan Eden Elyon. Gan Eden Elyon is the world of Bria. So the fact that neshamas enjoy the Ziva Shechina, they have Tainug there. How could they have Tainug if it's removed? So it says elsewhere, it's explained that when Malchus of Atzilus becomes Atik of Bria, he says the Ashpah is Bekiruv, the B'chinas Malchus. Malchus, in other words, is applying itself, coming closer, and that's becomes the Tainug of the Neshamas in Bria and Gan Eden Elyon. Why he's adding that, I'm not sure. I think he wants to probably explain that maybe why it's more pneumistic than the kav. I'm not positive. The kfar is ill. One more thing that Rebbe Rashab adds. Shezeu b'chinas shem ban hayered lamata. And we already explained earlier, this is like ban. Remember, ruach habehema, ban. You read this lamata. That's how malchus goes down below. Not like ma, but ban goes down below into biyah, that it's already descending and relating to the lower level. What he's adding in this parenthesis, I can't tell you for sure, as I said. I want to think about it some more. I just wanted to read it to maybe go back to the ban piece to understand.
Maybe he wants to say that even though that this is b'chinas keruv, still it's called Shechina.
But isn't Shechina a concept of kiruv? Shechenes mislabeshes.
He explained that it has to be a distance.
Yeah, nivdol be'erech. He said Shechina before he spoke about us has to be a distance. So maybe he's trying to qualify this distance, but there's also a certain element of closeness. It could be. I have to think about that because the distant part he has not discussed. Because he said v'gam sha'er be'etzem l'hoyer lishkem b'tachteinim. He did explain the previous page that Shechina is called Shechina for two reasons. One is because it's a leap, Tzimtzum, and the second because the kavanah is to come reside below. So it could be he's qualifying that there's. I have to think about that. But I want to still read it inside before I analyze it because I want to really understand everything that Rebbe Rashab is saying. Well, Malchus definitely has a relationship with the lower levels in two ways. Malchus of Atzilus itself, we learned earlier, even Pnimis. Okay, there are plenty of things to unpack here. Unless someone wants to ask something else, I'll read. I want to read till the end of the paragraph because I think this may help understand this piece here. This is very dense and very concentrated, yes, acknowledged, and I will try to explain it as much as I can, but I'm reading it now. And first I'm reading Pshat, the literal, what he's saying, and then I'm going to try to analyze and understand it. So let's just read a few more lines till the end of the paragraph, okay? And now he says like this, "Va'hefresh ben gimel taimim hanal," and the difference between these three reasons why Tav is called Shechina. So you see clearly he says three reasons. The three reasons I understand them to be, the first is because it radiates and in the darkness of the Tzimtzum, and then descends in Atzilus Sa'elyon till it nimshar b'chlolos neshamas Yisrael. Reason number two, because the Kav is Shechina, because it receives from Eirei Sof, like a interface between Eirei Sof and Mashpia to the Netzalim, the emanations of Atzilus. And the third is because the Kav becomes Atik of Ak, and ultimately from there into the Biyah Klolim, the general, the macrocosmic worlds. Similar to how Malchus becomes Atik of Bria. So now he's going to say, and as I said, that V'kocha only brings the first two reasons. Doesn't bring about Atik. He brings the first two reasons. But here, the Rebbe Rashab is saying there are three reasons, and here's the difference between them. Again, it's very short and brief, but we'll get there. The Latama Aleph, according to the first reason, that irradiates in the Tzimtzum, in the darkness of the Tzimtzum, Hariakav Bereshis Amshachose, Nikr B'Shem Shechina, that the Kav, in its initial transmission, is called Shechina. Why? Because its general purpose of the kav is to radiate this dark space. We're talking about a dark hole, a black hole, empty space. So its purpose from the Rishis Hamshachose, its whole purpose of transmission is to radiate this dark space. That's according to the first reason. And according to the second and third reason, the second being that it is like Makabel from Ein Sof and being Mashpia to the emanations, and the third, that it's Atik of Ak. So he says, Hainu Achashekvan Nimshach. This is already talking about after the Kav was already Nimshach, not Reshis Hamshachose. The first aspect of the Kav was its very purpose of why the Kav is there in the first place. The Kav is there to radiate the dark Tzimtzum. The second and third reasons already talking about after already was Nimshach. So it has two additional functions. One is that it draws from Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum into the Netzalim, and two, that it becomes Atik of Ak. That's what he's saying here. And for the record, interestingly, the V'kocha speaks about the difference between reason 1 and reason 2. The Rebbe Rashab says between reason 1 and 2 and 3 that he added number 3. But the language Achash Shekvar Nimshach is from V'kocha. So the Rebbe Marash himself distinguishes between reason 1 and reason 2. Because the Rebbe Rashab added a reason 3, he's saying that the difference is also applies to reason 3. And the next language is still all from the Rebbe Marash. Ve'ech sheyiyeh. However you explain it, all these different 3 explanations, says the Rebbe Rashab. Ve'ech sheyiyeh mekol ha'taimim. However you explain it according to from all these different reasons, one thing is clear: move on. In other words, the different explanations doesn't change the fact sha'akav nikra Shechina, that the kav is called Shechina hein bereishis v'skilas hamshachose, both in its initial transmission, the reishis and tchila, the beginning and the reish, the top and beginning of its hamshachah, v'hein ba'viyosei acharkach, and it's called Shechina also in its extension, in its continued role afterwards. Because you could argue that the Shechina is only called Shechina the first time the Kav shines, and that's it. But no, it's not the case, because reasons number 2 and 3 come to tell us that the Kav continues to be called Shechina due to its function, not just due to the fact that it's radiating the Tzimtzum. So he says, so, Eich sheyiyeh, v'kol ha'taimim. However you go, by any of the reasons, the bottom line is the Kav is called Shechina both in its initial and the beginning of its transmission and its continuation of transmitting. And what's Kudsha Brichu? Ayin Sof shalifnei Tzimtzum, and the infinite divine light of Pre-Tzimtzum. Shehu b'chinas Iggul HaGadol. That's the big Iggul, the big circle of the light that receded. So it left like a circle, we'll call it like a bagel, like a halo of light around the Tzimtzum of the dark place where the Kav shines. That's called Iggul HaGadol Shalifnei HaKav. That's higher than that precedes and is higher than the Kav. Zeu b'chinas Kudsha Brichu. That's Kudsha Brichu. So if the Kav is Shechina, despite whatever reason, the reason for that is the 3 different reasons. If the Kav is Shechina, the Ein Sof Infinite Tzimtzum, which is called the Iggul HaGadol, is the level of Kudsha Brichu. Liyes, being Shezeu b'chinas Atzmus Ein Sof, being that this is the core of the infinite divine light, she'eina begeder gilui be'elmus. That's not even in the category, not even in the domain of being revealed in the world. That's why it had to be concealed. V'hu kodesh u'muvdal. That's why it's called HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kudsha Brichu, kodesh u'muvdal. So just like we spoke earlier, that Kadosh Baruch Hu and Shechina is all relative, with Shechina manifesting and Kadosh being removed, Kadosh Baruch Hu being removed, whether it was Zah compared to Malchus, or Chachma compared to Bina, or Keser compared to Chachma, or the higher levels of Arich compared to Malchus of Arich, or Atik compared to Arich, or Ak Malchus Avak, or higher levels of Etzem Avak compared to Malchus Avak, or Pnimi Yasak compared to Chitzeni Yasak, or the Kav compared to Ak, so too the Kav is Shechina, and compared to that is Kudsha Brichu, is Ein Sof Lifnei HaTzimtzum, the Iggul HaGadol. You see literally how he explains Kudsha Brichu Shechina on all these levels. What do I count here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I think 10 levels. 10 levels where he explains Kudsha Brichu Shechina all the way now. Kav and Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, which is called the Iggul HaGadol, which is the divine energy that is not manifesting commensurate to the worlds like the Kav. It's the energy that precedes the Kav, Lifnei HaKav. And that concludes this paragraph. Just for the record, it's still not over. He's still going to explain further, but I'll stop here for any questions.
The Iggul HaGadol is not the Rishimu, right?
One second. I want to just make a comment. I know everybody's itching to ask, but I'm just telling you, my style of learning is trying to understand what it says here and not process. And then once you understand what it says, then we try to analyze it. So go ahead. You want to ask? Go ahead, please.
My question is the Iggul HaGadol, I think it's not the Rishimu.
Oh, how does the Rishimu come here? Where'd you see the word Rishimu, B'chla?
No, we learned about it a long time
ago.
ago.
The Iggul HaGadol is Ein Sof Lifnei HaTzimtzum. It's not the Rishimu. The Rishimu is not relevant to this discussion right now.
Could you just clarify what you mean by the Kav radiating the Tzimtzum? What does that actually mean? The Kav
I'll just go back to the example I gave you before.
I know, but is it the Kav that's doing it?
The teacher conceals his wisdom because the student needs space. And what does the teacher then do? He doesn't remain silent. He begins to transmit. It's called a stream of consciousness. He begins to transmit. A, B, C, D. The Kav is transmitting light step by step into that state of concealment that had to be concealed in order to leave room for another, for the space of the student. That's the Kav.
Okay,
Kav
but
is the teacher speaking and teaching a child.
I understand, but you said radiating, which sounds to me like it's
radiate means it was dark before, and now he's radiating by giving information and data and knowledge.
And the Tzimtzum, but this is all before the Tzimtzum.
No, it's after the Tzimtzum. The Tzimtzum is concealment. Then what happens next? Use the example. Don't try to think of the mechanics of it.
Okay.
When does the teacher speak? Before he conceals or after he conceals?
Before.
No, after. First he conceals his intelligence.
You said he conceals, so he conceals it
conceals
before.
all his brilliance because it's too powerful. Right. So he conceals, and then he begins to slow stream of consciousness called
and then he starts to speak. I understand. But the Tzimtzum comes in terms of when does
the teacher conceal? Before he reveals. First he withholds, and then he begins to teach. That the Kav is the teaching. The concealment is the Tzimtzum that precedes the Kav. I'm not sure.
The Tzimtzum comes before the Kav. That's all. Is that what you're saying?
The teacher's silence comes before his speaking.
Okay. And that Tzimtzum comes directly from the Or Ein Sof? I mean...
The Tzimtzum is the power of the teacher to restrain and be silent. It's as simple as that.
Okay. So you don't have a congruent kind of, Kudsha Brichu to Shechina with the Tzimtzum. It's in a different category, you're saying.
I'm not sure what you mean by that at all. Kudsha Brichu is the infinite light before the Tzimtzum. The Kav is the light that follows the Tzimtzum. So I'm not sure what you mean, congruent. I mean, like everything, there's the divine that's removed, and there's the divine that afterwards manifests as the Kav following the concealment.
All right, I'm not expressing it. I will think about it. Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay.
Why is it called Iggul HaGadol?
Do you want me to answer, or you think you can figure it out?
I cannot.
Anybody want to try to explain it? Okay.
It's a level of Sovev. It's
to use a physical example. if you have a light that's shining, that's filling up the entire expanse of a room, but it's too bright, it's too brilliant. So you have to dim or even completely shut the light. So what happens to the light itself? Being that Ein Sof doesn't disappear, God forbid. So the light, you draw it out of the room, basically, so it only surrounds the room now. And in the middle of the room, there's only a dark space that allows room for existence. So what would happen with that light? That light would then turn into an Iggul. Because the Tzimtzum, we know, is a Chol L'Mokem Panei, that's a Iggul, that's a hole, a perfect black hole. The Arizal explains it's Tzimtzum B'derech Iggul, means it's like think of like the hole inside of a bagel. And the light, therefore, around is like a aura, a halo, I should say, which, if you look at it physically, would look like a circle of light. Like you ever see, for example, a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse. You see like a halo. That's a perfect circle. So it's a dark hole in the middle that's eclipsing the sun. The moon is eclipsing the sun, but you see a halo around it. That's a physical example. In Ruchnius, the example is that the teacher's brilliance has now had to recede within the teacher, but it's still there. It's only the teacher is aware of it. So it's there in a form of an Iggul. Then comes, and then in the cheshach of the Tzimtzum now comes a ray, a line. I've shown this picture many times. It's an Eitz Chaim. Obviously, it's not physical, but conceptual. The line is a kav. Kav and Iggul is makif, circle. Kav is a line, like zeros and ones. And the kav is a line that has a milo mata. In Iggul, there's no milo mata. In an Iggul, in a circle, everything is, there's no such thing as top and bottom, because it's all equal. So it's an equal circle, equal circumference. So in Ruchnius, Ein Sof remains in the state of Iggul HaGadol. Now there are levels of Ein Sof that are even higher than the Iggul HaGadol, because Iggul HaGadol is a result of the Tzimtzum. Because so Chassidus talks about this in Samach Vav and Adam Kiyakriv and other places, whether the Tzimtzum affected the Iggul HaGadol or didn't affect. Nogabat Tzimtzum. There are many discussions. It's not really relevant to our conversation here at all. But again, if you want to learn more about the Iggul HaGadol, I would look at the end of Adam Kiyakriv Samach Vav. And you could probably also look at Sefer Likutim, Tzemach Tzedek, Iggul HaGadol. He talks about it there as well. Now, the Iggul HaGadol will become the root of all the Iggulim in the Shtalshlus. But it's the Kav, that's the paintbrush, so to speak, the stylus, the channel, the thread that carries the light into the space. Now, I've explained this topic, I don't know how many times. I would just go back to the example of the teacher and students, the only way you're going to be able to wrap your head around. Because if you try to figure it out on an engineering level, none of us were there by the Tzimtzum, we have not seen it. It's all conceptual, it's happening right now. So you have to think of it in terms of the example of a teacher where the divine has to conceal itself for us to be able to exist. Every time a teacher, a parent, a mashpia somewhat withholds, restrains themselves in order for the student to be able to stand on his own feet, you're exercising all these levels. Your energy, your ability to restrain and conceal, and then your spoon-feeding revelation that's commensurate, that fits the student. That's always the best examples. The Alter Rebbe's example for the Ein Sof, the Iggul HaGadol, the Tzimtzum, and the Kav. Now, the Ein Sof, like the Iggul HaGadol, remains in the background all the time. The teacher is aware of his brilliance. Even when the student only is getting a small little flow from the Kav, the Iggul HaGadol is fully there. It just receded and not revealed in that space where the student is, or the space what we would call Chol L'Mokem Panei. Okay.
You said that the Iggul HaGadol is a result
I also want to
of
keep
the
to this.
Tzimtzum. I think it's before the Tzimtzum.
Ayin Beis is discussing here. He uses the name Iggul HaGadol, but the focus here is really to try to understand the Kav and the Shechina that it's called. So though I'm happy to explain some of these concepts, but it's not really the place. There are places in Chassidus, and Ayin Beis included, where he discusses at length what the Iggul HaGadol is. So I'm happy to just repeat it, but if you really want more elaboration, I think you have to find other places in Chassidus where it's discussed at length. What were you saying? You wanted to follow up? You wanted to ask something? Hello?
Thank you.
Okay. I hope that was helpful. Are there any other questions? Okay. I'm going to give this more thought, obviously, and try to explain it further. I'm still struggling with understanding why he needs these three reasons. I understand the three reasons why the Kav is called Shechina, but I'm not sure why he needs to explain it. I think there's a little hinted in the last line, because he wants to say, because you could also hypothetically argue that the Kav's main function was only when it first radiated. But what is its ongoing function? But I find that not to be adequate, because the fact that it radiates at Tzimtzum, that's its like first, what he called Reishis Vascholis Hamshachose. B'tchilas Hamshachose, that's also a perpetual effect, that the Kav is constantly radiating this dark space. But then he says that the others is la'achre shekfar nimshach. Achre shekfar nimshach. And I'm bothered by what does he mean? What is he coming to say with that? I mean, at the end he says, no matter what the reason is, the Kav is still called Shechina. That's the main thing. But the fact that he says those two things, because V'kocha is very brief, the Rebbe Rashab doesn't elaborate a lot, just a bit. Maybe there's something hinted to also in the parentheses that that I said I need to study as well. But there's something here more than what meets the eye. So I'm trying to still wrap my head around it, to be honest.
I think the problem I'm having with the term, the Kav is radiating the Tzimtzum, because radiating is.
Does a teacher radiate the student when he teaches?
Yes, yes.
So why not?
Right.
What's the problem?
You're radiating a darkness, you're saying.
You're radiating in the place of darkness.
Okay. So the Tzimtzum came before the Kav, but it didn't. No, I know.
I've said that already quite a few times, yes.
Yes. All right. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Nothing to be sorry. I'm not sure what's unclear. That's what I'm trying to get to the bottom of. When a place is dark and you shine a light in it, it's radiating that dark space, right?
Yes.
So what's not clear about that?
Right. It's illuminating it maybe is better than radiating, because.
So it's a semantic thing. So you want to use illuminating?
No. I'm just.
No, illuminating is
radiating
fine too.
something seems to connote to me that it's not creating it, but it's never mind.
If illuminate works better for you, it's perfect.
I'm sorry, Rabbi. I think I got it now.
Okay. Any other questions? So we're going to stop here. They said I'll try to further explain and develop this. Could be the next section, may even help even more. Not sure. Okay.